4:52 in the morning, the second week of November, and I was standing in the doorway of a warming house with a flood hose running behind me, trying to decide whether to wake up 3 sleeping children. The little one, Etta, was 5, and she was flat on her back on the bench with her boots still on and her mittens clipped to her sleeves, taking up more of that bench than a person her size has any business taking up. Corky, who was 8, had folded himself into the corner with his hood up. And Rowan, who was 12 and who I already understood was the load-bearing member of that family, was awake. Of course she was awake. She was sitting straight up with a paperback she was not reading, watching the door, because she had been running the night shift in that house for 4 months, and she did not know how to stop. Their mother was 6 miles east at the pellet plant in Mountain Iron, with 2 hours left on a 12, and she did not know her kids were in my building. That is the true beginning, so I am starting there. Behind me the ice was half flooded. If you have never made ice, here is the part people do not know. You cannot rush it, and you cannot fix it later. You lay water in thin passes and let each one set, and if you hurry a single pass you get a soft spot that will not show for 3 days, and then will chip out under a kid's edge in the middle of a game. And everybody will say the rink is bad, and they will be right, and it will be your fault. There is no way to go back and put down that pass again. I had 11 minutes before I had to close the door and go finish it. Rowan looked at me across that warming house and said, in the flat voice of a 12-year-old who has already had to negotiate with 3 adults that month, "You're not going to call anybody." It was not a question. It was a bid. And what I want you to understand about the whole rest of this story is that I stood there for a second with my hand on that door, and I was not deciding what to do about a room. I was 9 years old again, in a kitchen in Chisholm, listening to 2 adults be reasonable about my family in the next room. My name is Anders Maki. I was 36 that winter, and I ran the Vermilion Trail Arena in Eveleth, Minnesota, which is a town of about 3,300 people on the Iron Range, 90 minutes north of Duluth, where the ground is red and the winter starts in October and finishes when it feels like it. Hockey town. You have to understand what that means up here. It is not a hobby. There are towns on this range that lost the mine and lost the school and still somehow kept the rink, because the rink is where everybody's kid learns that they can do a hard thing badly for 2 years and then do it well. I was the arena manager, which in a building that size means I was also the ice maker, the compressor guy, the sharpener, the scoreboard operator, the snowplow, and the man who mops what people leave in the lobby on Saturdays. I got up at 3:40 every morning of my adult life. Ice does not care what your evening was like. Varsity had 5 a.m. slots 4 days a week. If the ice was not cut and flooded and set, 22 kids and 2 coaches stood on rubber mats with their arms crossed. So I was in the building by 4:15, and I ran the resurfacer, and I did my passes, and by 5 the ice looked like a sheet of glass somebody had breathed on. I loved it. I want that said plainly, because there is a way of telling this story where I sound like a lonely man waiting for a family to walk in the door, and that is not the truth. I liked my building. I liked the compressor room and its noise. I liked being the person who kept a thing running that a whole town used and nobody thought about. Here is the wound, and then I will get on with it. There were 3 of us. Me, my brother Ollie, and my sister Marit. Our dad went to the oil patch in North Dakota in 1997 and stopped calling in 1998, and our mother worked nights at a nursing home in Virginia, Minnesota, and for about 2 years it worked, more or less in the way those things work. meaning it did not work at all, but nothing had gone visibly wrong yet. Then our mother got hurt on a lift and could not work for a while, and my Aunt Ruthie in Chisholm and my Uncle Dale in Cook and a cousin in Babbitt all sat down in a kitchen and were very reasonable and very loving with each other, and at the end of it I went to Chisholm and Ollie went to Cook and Marit went to Babbitt. For a year. That was the word. A year. Until Mum's back was better. I want to be fair to those people. They were good. Ruthie fed me and bought me skates and came to games. Nobody in that kitchen was a villain, and nobody meant a single bad thing by it. But the year ended and there was a reason it made more sense to leave things how they were, and then there was another reason. And my mother went back to work at a different place, and the arrangement that was supposed to last a year lasted until I was 18. I saw my brother at Christmas. I saw my sister less. Marit is 51 now. She lives in Superior, and she is a stranger to me who has my grandmother's exact laugh, and every time I hear it on the phone I feel like a man being shown a photograph of a house he grew up in that somebody else lives in now. Nobody split my family on purpose. That is the whole point. It got split by a series of extremely reasonable decisions made by tired people who loved us, and every single one of them, taken by itself, was the right call. That is what I knew, standing in that doorway at 4:52 in the morning, that nobody else in this story knew yet. It started in September, and it started with the little one. The arena runs a learn to skate on Saturday mornings, 9 to 10, $5. Skates included if we have your size, and the last 2 Saturdays of the session we let them stay on for the open ice after. It is the closest thing that building has to a public service, and it has been running since 1961. Etta Krempotic came to the first Saturday in a snowsuit 2 sizes too big with her sister and brother, and she got out on that ice and fell down 11 times in 9 minutes, and then she got up the 12th time and made it 4 strides, and she turned around to find who was watching. She found me. I was in the doorway of the players' bench with a shovel. She hollered, across the entire sheet at the top of her lungs, "Did you see that?" I said I saw it. She said, "I did it anyway," which is a thing her mother says I found out later, and which about summed up that entire family. Rowan came to me in the second week, on the bench outside the skate room, and she did not waste time. "Do you pay anybody to do stuff here?" "Like what?" "Like the pucks. And the mats. And there's a lost and found bin that hasn't been sorted since I was in kindergarten." She had a list. She had actually made a list on the back of a school lunch menu. "I'd take skate rental, but I'm 12, so probably you can't." I said the arena's whole payroll was me and a high schooler named Petey, who ran the concession on game nights. She said, "Okay," and folded the list up and put it in her coat, and I did not understand for another 6 weeks that she had not been asking for a job. She had been asking for a place to be that had a grown-up in it, and a reason to be there that would not embarrass her mother. And their mother, Dahlia Krempotic, was 34 years old, and she worked the 4-on-4 off-night rotation at the pellet plant, 6 in the evening to 6 in the morning, which on the range is the shift that pays and the shift that eats you. She had dark hair she wore in the same braid every day of her life, and forearms like a person who moves things for a living, and a way of standing in a doorway that made you understand she was not planning to come in. She came for the second Saturday and stood by the glass in her coat with her hands in her pockets. I went over. I did the thing I do, which is say something about somebody's kid, because I have run that building for 11 years and it is the only small talk I own. I said Etta had a beautiful lack of fear. Delia said, "She gets that from nobody I know," and almost smiled, and then a woman across the lobby said her name and she went and had a 2-minute conversation, and came back and stood by the glass again, and I noticed what I noticed. She had answered the woman with total warmth and given her nothing. Not one fact. Somebody had asked her a simple question about her week, and she had returned a joke and a compliment, and no information at all, smoothly, the way a goalie steers a puck into the corner. I have thought about that a lot since. That was the first thing I ever learned about Delia, before I knew a single detail of her life, that she was extraordinarily good at being liked by people who knew nothing about her. The second thing I learned came about 20 minutes later, and I only caught it because I was standing where I was standing. Open skate ended, and the three of them came off, and Etta could not get her rental skates off, because a 5-year-old cannot get rental skates off, and Delia knelt down on that rubber mat in her work boots and did it. Then she did Corky's, who could have done his own. Then she stood up, and Rowan was already tying her own boots with her chin down. Delia said, "You want help?" And Rowan said, "I got it," without looking up. It was nothing, 4 words. But Delia's face did a thing for about a half-second. A flinch that landed and got put away, and then she said, "Okay, Bug," and went and got the coats. I have replayed that half-second more than almost anything else from that fall. Because everybody in this story eventually told me what was wrong with that family, and every one of them told me a different version, and none of them ever put it as accurately as a 12-year-old girl tying her own bootlaces on a rubber mat in September. October came and did what October does up here. The Saturday session ended and the kids kept coming, because Rowan had made a schedule. I am not exaggerating. She showed up with it. Public skate was Tuesday and Thursday 4 to 5:30 and Sunday afternoons, and they came to all of it, and in between Rowan sorted the lost and found bin without being asked, and then sorted the puck bags, and then reorganized my entire skate rental wall by size, which took her 3 weeks and which I still use. Corky, meanwhile, discovered the compressor room. That boy asked 800 questions that fall. Why does ice sweat? Why do you cut it before you flood it? Why does hot water make harder ice? Which is a thing everybody says and almost nobody can explain, and I made him look it up himself, and he came back 2 days later and explained it to me at high speed with his hands going. I started keeping cocoa mix behind the concession counter. That is a small thing. And it was not a small thing. Here is what I figured out by the 3rd week of October, mostly from Corky, who leaked information the way Rowan did not. Their grandmother Franny had watched the kids overnight for the last 6 years. In August, Franny remarried a man from Grand Rapids and moved 80 miles southwest, which is the exact kind of good news that quietly destroys a household. So since August, Delia had been leaving at 5:15 in the evening, and Rowan at 12 had been making dinner, doing bedtime and sleeping with her mother's old phone next to her head. And Delia got home at 6:40 in the morning off a 12-hour night, and turned around and drove all 3 of them to school at 7:05. That last part was the part I could not get out of my head. Not the overnight. The drive. A woman who has been awake for 24 hours, driving 3 kids on Highway 53 in the dark in October. Corky told me, without any idea what he was telling me, that his mum had fallen asleep at the 4-way by the credit union, and Rowan had said her name, and she woke up. I gave Delia the key on a Thursday. It is the brass key to the warming house door, and it lives on a red skate lace because everything in an arena lives on a skate lace. I put it on the counter between us and slid it over and said the building was open from 4:15 every morning anyway, and if the kids came over at 6:30 and did homework in the warm room, I could run them to the school at 7 when I ran the trash, and she could sleep from 6:45 to 2. She looked at that key for a long moment. Why? Because I'm up anyway. That's not an answer. That's a schedule. It's the only answer I've got at 6 in the morning. She took the key. It cost her something to do it. I could see the price on her face. And for 11 days. That is how it went. And those 11 days are the best 11 days I had had in probably 9 years. Let me give you one of them. Because 11 days is a number, and a number is not a thing anybody remembers. The 4th morning. 6:31. I had the ice down and set, and the varsity was out there doing a drill their coach has been running since 2004. And the lobby door went, and it was 3 kids coming in out of a 12-degree morning, with their backpacks and Corky's boot half off. Rowan put a pan of cinnamon rolls on the concession counter, the tube kind, baked at 6 a.m. by a 12-year-old, and said, "These are for you, but I'm having 2. Etta got up on the stool at the counter and told me at enormous length about a boy in her class named Grayson, who had opinions about dinosaurs that were factually incorrect. Corky went straight to the compressor room door, which he was not allowed through, and stood there in a state of longing until I said fine. 2 minutes, hands in your pockets. And I stood behind that concession counter with a paper towel and a cinnamon roll, and watched the varsity skate through the glass, while a 5-year-old briefed me on dinosaur misinformation, and I had a feeling in my chest that I did not have a name for, and did not go looking for one. At 7, I drove them to Eveleth Elementary in the arena truck with the trash can still in the back, and Rowan reached over and turned the radio to the Duluth station without asking, which is the single greatest compliment I have ever received in my life. Then I went back and mopped a lobby. That is the whole of it. 11 mornings of exactly that. Which brings me to what Rowan told me on the 3rd or 4th of those mornings, while she was stacking the mats, and I was scraping the door gasket. She said, out of nowhere, "You know she's going to do the speech." What speech? The one where she warns you. Rowan did not look up from the mats. She said it the way you tell somebody the bus comes at 7:02. She's got a whole thing. 3 kids and a night shift, blah blah, so don't get any ideas. She does it in this voice, like she's being nice about it. I put down the scraper. How many times have you heard it? 3. Rowan set the last mat on the stack and squared the corner and finally looked at me. And I want to tell you that a 12-year-old girl can look at a grown man with more experience in her face than he has in his whole body. It works, by the way. Every time. That's kind of the point of it. Adrienne came up from Duluth on the first Sunday in November. Dahlia's older sister, 41. Married to a man named Russ, who runs a marina on Park Point. 2 boys of her own in high school. A house with a lake view and 2 bedrooms nobody sleeps in. She drove up in an Acura with a car seat still in the back from the grandkid she does not have yet, which tells you something about how far ahead that woman plans. She came to the rink because that is where the kids were, and she watched Etta fall down and get up for about 10 minutes, and then she came and stood next to me at the glass and introduced herself and said, "You're the one with the key." I said I was. "That's kind," she said. And she meant it, and then she said, "It's not going to be enough," and she meant that too. And then Adrienne Krempotic Boyle laid it out for me, standing at the glass of a hockey rink on a Sunday afternoon, in the calm voice of a woman who has run the numbers 11 times. Dahlia was making it on nights, because nights paid a $4 an hour differential, and because Franny had been free. Franny was gone. Overnight cur for 3 kids on the range. If you can even find a person who will do it. Runs more than the differential. So the differential is now a fiction. She is working nights for nothing, and she cannot bid days, because the bid goes by seniority, and she has 6 years, and the November 1st bid, this was already passed. This was the thing that had gone wrong in October. Had gone to a man with 19. So it was nights until at least next November. 12 more months of a 12-year-old running a house from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. I have 2 empty bedrooms, Adrian said. Good school. 20 minutes from Russ's shop. I'm asking for Rowan and Corky. She keeps Etta because Etta's 5 and I'm not a monster. Weekends, holidays, all of it. And the second she's on days it's over and they come home. I did not say anything. You think I'm the bad guy in this, she said. No, ma'am. I think you're the reasonable one. That's worse. She looked at me then, properly for the first time. My sister is going to fall asleep on 53, she said. Or Rowan is going to burn a pan. Or the county is going to get a call from a school nurse, and then it isn't me making the plan. It's a stranger with a caseload of 40. I'm not trying to take them, Anders. I'm trying to stop her from losing all 3 the hard way. And here is the thing about that sentence. It was true. Every word of it was true, and I had no counter for a single clause. And if I had been in that Chisholm kitchen in 1999, as a grown man, instead of a 9-year-old on the stairs, I would have heard exactly this, in exactly this voice, from someone who loved us. I said the only thing I had. I said I was one of the kids in that plan. Adrienne waited. It was supposed to be a year, I said. My aunt in Chisholm. My brother went to cook. My sister went to Babbitt. Everybody in that kitchen was good and everybody was right, and it never got put back. Not ever. I'm 36 years old and I don't know my sister. She was quiet for a while. That's a real thing, she said finally. It is. But it isn't an argument, it's a fear. And I can't put my sister's kids on a fear. She was right about that too. That is what I mean about her. The call came on the 9th of November, and it was not the county and it was not dramatic, which somehow made it worse. Etta's kindergarten teacher noticed she was falling asleep at the 10 a.m. table, 3 days running. She called home. Nobody picked up, because Delia was asleep. She called the emergency contact, which was still Franny in Grand Rapids. Franny drove up. By dinner, everybody in Delia's life knew that her 5-year-old was sleeping through the morning at school, and Franny was crying in her kitchen saying she never should have moved, and Adrian was on the phone from Duluth being calm. And Rowan had shut the bedroom door and would not come out. Delia came to the arena that night at 9:40 after the kids were down, which meant she had left them alone for the 11 minutes it takes to drive there and back, which meant she was not thinking straight. She put the key on the counter. I'm going to say this fast, she said, because if I go slow I'll do it wrong. Delia, you've been good to us. You have been better to my kids in 7 weeks than their father was in 9 years, and I am not going to stand in a hockey rink and pretend I don't know that. Her voice was steady, and her hands were not. And I have to stop, right now, tonight, before it gets any further in. Because of Etta falling asleep? Because of what everybody's going to say next? She pushed the key an inch closer to me. You know what my sister said on the phone tonight? She said, at least the kids have that man at the rink. Like you're a resource. Like you're in the plan. She laughed. And it came out wrong. You're not in the plan, Anders, because you're a person, and people leave, and if I let you be the reason this holds together, then when you go, it doesn't just break. It breaks them. You've got no evidence I'd go. I've got a whole life of it. That's not evidence. That's a history. It's the only kind of evidence there is. She had her keys in her fist. I have 3 kids and I do not get to gamble. That's it. That's the whole thing. Somebody with 3 kids does not get to find out. She left the brass key on the counter with the red lace curled beside it. I stood in that lobby a long time after her taillights went. Then I went and turned on the compressor and cut ice at 10:30 at night that nobody had asked for, because I did not know what else to do with my hands. I did not see them for 5 days. On the third of those days, Ivor Rautio came to the arena. Ivor made ice in that building for 31 years before I did. He is 74. He is Finnish in the way that only range Finns are Finnish, and he taught me everything I know about water, including the thing he says every time, which is that you cannot fix a bad pass. You can only lay a better one on top and hope. He does not sleep. He never has. He comes to the arena at ungodly hours because he is awake and there is nothing on television, and he stands in the compressor room with his hands behind his back listening to the machine like a man at a concert. He said, "No kids this week." No. He listened to the compressor for a while. Krempotic girl. That's Franny's daughter. Franny yelled at me in a Kmart in 1987 and she was right to. It's over. She ended it. Did she say why? I told him. All of it, more than I meant to. The key on the counter, the sister in Duluth, the 2 empty bedrooms, the shift bid gone to a man with 19 years, and the sentence about how people leave, and if you let a person be the reason it holds together, then when he goes it does not break. It breaks them. Ivor thought about that for a good long while. Then he said, "She's not wrong that you could go. She's wrong about what she's supposed to do about it." Meaning what? Meaning you can't prove a future. He turned around and looked at me. Nobody can. She's asking for a guarantee and there is no such thing. And while she waits for one, a lawyer in Duluth is going to write up a temporary custody arrangement. And I have lived long enough on this range to tell you what temporary means in a legal document in November. So what do I do? You quit trying to promise her the 20 years. He said it like it was obvious, and to him it was. Give her one that's already true. You're at this building at 4:15 tomorrow no matter what she decides tonight. That's not a promise, boy, that's a fact she can check. Then he went home across the alley and I cut ice, and 3 days later I got a knock I was not expecting. On the 6th day, Rowan showed up at the arena alone at 4:40 in the afternoon. On foot, in the cold, having walked 11 blocks, and stood in front of me with her hands jammed in her coat pockets. I need to tell you something and then I'm going home and you can't tell her I came. Rowan, his name was Gil. I shut up. She told me the whole thing standing up, in about 6 minutes without crying, which I found harder to watch than crying would have been. Gil had come around when Rowan was 9, and Corky was 5 and Etta was 1. He was, by her account, fine. He fixed the dryer. He took Corky fishing at Ely Lake twice. He stayed 14 months. He and Delia had talked about a bigger place out past the golf course. And then one Saturday morning in the driveway, Etta, who was 2 by then, and had heard Corky do it, and did not know any better, called him Dad. He got weird, Rowan said. Not mean, just weird. And that night he told Mum it was moving too fast and he needed to think, and he was gone in 9 days. She shrugged with one shoulder. Etta doesn't remember him, Corky does. He asked about him for like a year. And you? I remember Mum in the driveway. She said it very evenly. She wasn't crying about Gil. She was mad at herself. She kept saying I did this, not to me, just out loud. I sat down on the bench by the skate room because my legs wanted it. That's when the speech started, Rowan said. After she says it to everybody now, it's her, like she searched for it, it's her helmet. She let that sit for a second. Then she said the thing I have thought about every week since. I'm not asking you to be my dad. That's not what this is. I'm 12, I'm not stupid. Her chin came up. But she's going to say it to you, and when she does, everybody says the same thing back. They say that's a lot, and they're nice about it, and they go. And I wanted you to know that it's a test before you take it, because you're the only one who's ever gotten this far, and you're going to walk into it blind. Then she said she had to be home before Corky burned the pizza rolls, and she walked 11 blocks back in the dark. And I let her, because she would not get in my truck, because she had already decided a long time ago that she does not get to need things. She came on the 17th of November, a Monday, one of her nights off, at 4:50 in the morning. I do not know what she told the kids. I know Rowan was awake for it, because Rowan was awake for everything. I was on the ice with the hose, doing my second pass, and I heard the lobby door and then the rubber mat sound of somebody crossing to the glass, and there she was in her coat with her arms folded. I shut the water off and came over. She did not say hello. She said, "Adrienne wants an answer by Thanksgiving. What are you going to tell her?" "I don't know. That's why I'm standing in a hockey rink at 5 in the morning." She looked out at the sheet, at the half of it that was glass, and the half that was still grey and unset. "Rowan told me she came here. I figured she would." "She's 12, Delia said, and her voice finally came apart a little at the edge. "She's 12, and she walked 11 blocks in the dark to fight for a thing I told her she couldn't have. She wasn't fighting for herself. I know exactly who she was fighting for. That's what's wrong with it." She turned around and put her back against the glass and looked at me, and I watched her get ready, and I understood, because a 12-year-old had warned me that this was the moment. I could see the shape of it coming toward me. I could see her load it. She said, "I come with 3 kids and a night shift." I said, "I get up early anyway." She started to say something and stopped. "That's not." She pushed off the glass. "You don't get to do that. That's not a serious answer. It's the only serious answer I've got." I set the hose down on the mat. "You've said that sentence to men before. Rowan told me. She said it works every time, and I believe her, and I want you to hear that I know what it's for." Delia stood very still. "It's built so the man can leave while he still feels like a good guy," I said. "You hand it to him, and he says, 'Wow, that's a lot.' And he goes, and it doesn't hurt as much as it would have in 14 months, and nobody in a driveway calls anybody dad. It's a good system. It has worked 3 times. Don't. I'm not mocking it. I'd have built the same thing." I picked my words carefully, because I have had exactly 1 shot at a few sentences in my life, and this was the one I could not do a second pass on. "Delia, I know what a reasonable plan does to a family. I was 9. There were 3 of us. It was supposed to be 1 year, and my aunt was kind to me every day of my childhood, and I have a sister in Superior who is a stranger with my grandmother's laugh." Her face changed. "So when your sister tells you it's just Rowan and Corky, and just until you get on days, I am the one man on this range who cannot tell you that's fine. Because I have seen how it goes when everybody is right. That's not an offer," she said low. "That's a scare. You're correct. Here's the offer." I made myself say it slowly. "I'm at this building at 4:15 every morning for the next 20 years, whether you're in my life or not. That's not a favor and it's not a sacrifice. It's a compressor and a hockey schedule. What I'm asking is whether I get to spend those mornings with your kids in the warm room instead of alone in it. And when it gets hard, it's already hard. It's November, and your 5-year-old's asleep at the table, and your 12-year-old is walking 11 blocks in the dark. This is the hard part, and I'm standing in it, and I'm not looking at the door." Delia Krempotic put her hand over her mouth, and stood in the cold of my building and cried for the first time in front of me, and I did not move toward her. Because she had not asked me to, and because I had learned that much watching her daughter stack mats. When she could, she said, "I can't promise you anything. I didn't ask you to promise. I asked you to let me take them to school." And she laughed, wrecked, wet, entirely real, and said, "God, you are so boring." And I said that was the single nicest thing anybody had said to me in about a decade, and it was. The overnights got solved by Iva Rautio, who is 74 and made ice in that building for 31 years before I did, and who lives in the yellow house across the alley from the Krempotic place. Eva does not sleep. Never has. He offered, and Dahlia said no twice, and Franny called him and yelled at him in Finnish about something from 1987. And then Dahlia said yes, and for 11 months an old man sat in a recliner in that living room from 9 to 5:30 and read Louis L'Amour paperbacks and made an 8-year-old explain the compressor to him. Dahlia bid days the following November. It cost her the differential and about $9,000 a year, and she took it, and we ate a lot of hot dish that first winter. Adrian came up on the 3rd of December that year with a hatchback full of groceries she claimed were on sale, and she has done that once a month for 6 years, and neither of those women has ever once discussed Thanksgiving of 2025 out loud. That is how it is done in this family. I have learned the dialect. We were married the following August at the little church up on Fale, and Etta was the flower girl, and took it extremely seriously, and Corky ran the sound. Rowan is 19 now. She is at Duluth studying mechanical engineering, and she came home last winter and rebuilt the arena's brine pump with a YouTube video and a torque wrench, and made me hold the light. And this morning, this is the part I actually wanted to get to. This morning was Tuesday, and my alarm went at 3:40 the way it has gone at 3:40 since I was 25, and Etta was up. She is 11. She plays now, Squirt A, and she has that same beautiful lack of fear, and she has decided that she wants to skate on fresh ice before anybody else touches it, which is a thing I understand at the cellular level. Dahlia came out to the kitchen in her robe while I was filling the thermos and said, "You don't have to take her. She can wait for the 7 o'clock. I said, "I'm up anyway." She stood there in the doorway of our kitchen with her arms folded and looked at me for a second longer than the sentence needed. Then she said, "Yeah, you are."